Hello, awesome book lovers. Just wanted to sneak in a quick hello and let you know there's another jam-packed episode ahead. And not only that, but at the end we have a fantastic reading from Kevin Klehr's amazing book called Winter Masquerade, plus some book reviews. So much to enjoy. And thank you so much for hitting download or hitting play. Take care.
Hi there, it's Sarah Bacaller here. My new novel, Tenacity, is a coming-of-age story about Gab, a young woman in rural Victoria trying to forge a future amidst difficult circumstances. I'm experimenting by sharing this novel as a twice-weekly email serial. So, if you're one of the first 2,000 subscribers, you'll receive free access to the novel as twice-weekly instalments in your inbox, starting on the 1st of April. If you'd like to subscribe, head to sarahbacaller.com. That's sarahbacaller.com. But if you don't want to wait for the twice-weekly instalments, the book will also be available through Amazon, Booktopia, and many other online retailers. 50% of royalties from ebook and print book sales are going to be donated to the Babes Project, an amazing Australian not-for-profit that supports women through crisis and challenging pregnancies, as well as through early parenting. Thanks for listening.
Once upon a time. Welcome to Australian Book Lovers, your destination for imagination.
A huge warm welcome to everyone, and an even huger thank you for joining us once again for the Australian Book Lovers podcast. Our mission, as always, is to bring fabulous Australian and Indigenous literature spanning a whole range of genres to book lovers all around the globe, as well as fantastic resources and information for passionate authors looking to write their next bestseller. I am Darren Kazanko, dystopian science fiction and horror author, avid reader, and one of your co-hosts and co-founders of the Australian Book Lovers podcast, coming to you today from, as you probably all know now, listeners, the wonderful, stunningly beautiful, and very secretive, so please don't tell anyone, Corner Country.
And I'm Veronica Strachan, fantasy, memoir, and picture book writer, reader, and your other co-founder and host for today, coming to you from Wurrung Country, Wurundjeri, part of the Kulin Nation, in a slightly soggy but not as soggy as New South Wales and Queensland. So sending our best wishes to all those people up in Queensland who have been really struggling with the floods up there.
Just devastating. I mean, you've got the pandemic and then, obviously the difficulties with the borders, the difficulties with business, and finally things start to happen. And now I think I read that they had close to 1 year's annual rainfall in a period of 3 days. Yeah,
just huge amounts of water.
I mean, I've seen some pretty good flash flooding. When I say good, quite astounding flash flooding when I was living, both in Cairns and I lived for many years on the Gold Coast. But I definitely haven't seen anything like that. And as you said, all of our sending as much energy as we can to all the people in the Eastern Board that are unfortunately going through this very big test of nature. But I suspect that by the end of it, everyone's coming out stronger. So that's my hope. Yes.
That is Australia, isn't it? The land of floods and sweeping plains and bushfires and all those kind of things. So that is what we're about, is supporting Australian writers and also readers and introducing them to fabulous Australian authors.
Yes, 100%. And here we are doing that very thing you just mentioned, and we're doing it via episode number 48.
Which is pretty good. Rolling. I like that. 48's a nice number. It's 4 dozen. That's pretty good.
Well, that's a point, yes. And, the number 8 is also the sign for infinity, kind of, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. But, there may be some other unique features about the number 48.
Okay. Darren, I suspect you've got some news about the number 48. Tell us.
Yeah, I found a little bit of a scribble on a piece of paper, and that just happened to be about the number 48, which is, as you know, or as you probably aware, made up of a combination of the vibrations and attributes of the number 4 and the number 8. So number 4 brings the qualities of realistic values, truth and honesty, determination and diligence, building strong foundations for the self and others, achieving success, practicality, and hard work. Number 4 also relates to our passion and drive. However, not to be outdone, the number 8 resonates with manifesting wealth and abundance, learning through experience, inner strength and wisdom, self-reliance and dependability, and karma, the universal spiritual law of cause and effect, and giving and receiving, which is pretty cool.
Yes.
So you bring them together, you get the number 48, which is the number we're enjoying right now. And apparently it is a message that a cycle or phase will soon be coming to an end, with rewards coming from hard work well done. So the theory is that not to fear lack or loss, as these endings and conclusions will lead to auspicious new beginnings and opportunities, and your success, or in this case maybe all of our success and achievements, will bring blessings and rewards of many kinds into our lives. Now, not to reveal too much at the moment, but that's quite astounding, really, because number 48, meaning that a cycle or phase will soon be coming to an end, is kind of resonating in exactly what's happening, on this side of the border down in SA when it comes to my own personal situation, which is going to be a brand new adventure, which is going to be a fantastic new adventure, a little bit scary, a little bit fun, and a little bit everything in between. What was that quote that you had from last week, Veronica? Something between boredom and panic?
Yes.
Boredom and total fear?
Total fear, yes.
Yeah, so I'm going to explore that realm, not just the total fear, all in between. But yes, so there we go. A little bit of fun, number 48, but it is great to be this far in. And look, my little milestone, I think, for a celebration for us both will be episode number 50. I can't wait. It's only around the corner. And of course, episode 50 will mark, it's just the beginning, because we plan to be here a long time and bring lots and lots of cool stuff to all the book lovers and obviously to all the writers out there as well. So yes, but 48, we are coming like a steam train.
We are. And while we're become comfortable with settling into the niche and, I have a good chat and there's lots of things we talk about, there's still so many more new things that we're trying. We've got some bits and pieces going to happen over the next few months as we, again, do a bit of a reshuffle and do things a little bit differently. So stay tuned, everybody. And,
absolutely. It's
keep
an organic thing. It's an evolving
on the podcast
thing.
And the website, of course, because we did this podcast as a kind of an adjunct to the website, but it's kind of taken on a life of its own.
Well, the two are slowly coming together, and hopefully will form one big, massive monster, like a friendly Godzilla that's going to storm through and breathing out books and adventures and igniting imaginations all around the country. So
yes,
I've got a very silly-looking Godzilla in my head now, but I'm sure we can come up with something different. Maybe a big giant wombat or...
there you go.
But yes, they are coming together and forming a unique thing. But yeah, definitely organic, definitely evolving, definitely growing. And hey, that's what life's all about, isn't it? Trying things, bringing in new things, taking risks.
And life's too short to sit still. Let's put that out there.
Yes. It's also too short to not go to some news. So
yes, bring it on.
How about some news? Woohoo! Toot.
I have some news for readers. The 2022, it's hard to say, the 2022 Stellar Prize long list is out, which is fantastic. So here are the top 12 according to the Stellar Prize. The Stellar Prize, what is the Stellar Prize? Stellar champions the work of Australian women writers, cis, trans and non-binary inclusive. Through a series of strategic initiatives, they strive to promote Australian women's writing, support greater participant.
I was going to say that does sound like a tongue twister of a sentence. I'm glad you're saying it.
Yep. A series of strategic initiatives, they strive to promote Australian women's writing, support greater participation in the world of books, and create a more equitable and vibrant national culture. So they do that by supporting women's writers, growing the readership for women's writers, driving systemic change, and increasing access to and participation in literature. So really good group of people. And this, in alphabetical order, is the list for the 2022, the long list. Coming of Age in the War on Terror by Randall Abdul Fattah. Take Care by Eunice Andrada, Drop Bear by Evelyn Araluan. And you might remember we mentioned last week that she's going to be at the Mountain Riders Festival in Mount Macedon for lunch. And I wish I could go, but I can't.
Say where you won't
book your ticket anyway. She's one of the 4 people there. She is Haunted by Paige Clark. No Document by Anwen Crawford. Bodies of Light by Jennifer Down. Billa Yaradangalangare by Anita Heiss. And yes, I did practice that one more time because that's written in, I believe it's Wiradjuri, and I have read that. And if you want the review, it's on one of our early episodes. Stone Fruit by Lee Lay. Permafrost by S.J. Norman. Homecoming by Alfie Shiosaki. The Open by Lucy Van. And Another Day in the Colony by Chelsea Watego. So there you go.
Very eclectic list.
Yes. So this is from Melissa Lukashenko. I've read 2 of her books too. They are great. She is the chair of the judging panel. And just a quick comment from her. In the aftermath of Black Lives Matter and the Me Too, stellar writers are not holding back. Australian women and non-binary writers are producing innovative, sophisticated literature in very difficult times. It has been a great privilege to read and assess their work for the 2022 Stella Prize. So that was my news for readers. And
Powerful
my
declaration.
Oh, yeah. It's really good. I'm loving the energy and all of the stuff that's going on. And what I suggest for writers is that you get on and look at all of the Australian writing festivals. There are some really good ones starting to kick in. Again, people are starting to rebook. We spoke quite a lot about the Adelaide Fest and the Adelaide Writers Fest is coming up very soon. Clunes Booktown Festival is out. And that is one of the best regional Victorian book festivals you can get. And that's back at the end of April, 30th of April, beginning of May, which is fantastic. And there's also short story competitions and writing competitions and all of those kind of things happening. And look up, if you want to help with those kind of places, for readers, there are often volunteers required for those kind of festivals. And for writers, jump in and volunteer as well. And you get to talk to some of the more established writers as well. So lots of really good festivals happening at the moment.
And I'm glad you mentioned, writing competitions because actually for this episode number 48 news, I thought I'd just shine the spotlight on a couple of short story competitions that now these are coming to a close in March, so you've got to be quick. But I thought, why not? That most of them, these are short story competitions. So for the writers out there that may have short stories tucked away, or they don't mind, boosting up that last cup of coffee and sit, burning that midnight lamp. But so these short story competitions I actually reading from the writerscentre.com.au. So writerscentre.com.au. So you obviously that gives you a little bit of confidence. There's nothing shonky or anything about these. So the first one is a quite interesting one. Tales from the Pandemic, which is a short story competition. So Your Library Eastern Regional Libraries are calling for short pieces of fiction or non-fiction writing of up to 3,000 words for the 2022 short story competition. They want to capture the tempo of the time we currently live in while it is still fresh and preserve it for the future. So once again, the theme for this short story competition is Tales from the Pandemic. Now, it does close on the 11th of March. So, yep, that's just around the corner by the time this podcast comes out. Still, you just might have a lightning bolt of inspiration and just, pump out something absolutely amazing. Sometimes, the best things, the most creative things come when your back's against the wall. So, again, the word limit is 3,000. So, and that would mean it have to be 3,000. It might even be a lot shorter. So, first prize is $3,000. Second prize, $1,000. Third prize, $500. And local prize, which $1,000. And a selection of stories will be published in an anthology by Ingram Spark. All of these short story competitions you can find on the writercentre.com.au, so definitely go there and have a look. Another couple I want to talk to you about is the Peter Carey Short Story Awards for 2022. So the Moorabool Shire Libraries has announced the Peter Carey Short Story Award for 2022 is open. Yay! Australian residents who have original short stories between 2,000 and 3,000 words are encouraged to enter to win a great prize and get published. Now, the theme is open, so there are no limits. Only the sky. The sky's the only limit, but even that has no limits because then it turns dark and it's out of space, and space is eternal. So there's no limits. Now, again, it's between 2,000 and 3,000 words with a limit on 3,000 words. There is an entry fee on this one of $15. First prize is $2,000. Second prize, $1,000. And both stories will be published in the spring 2022 issue of Meanjin and receive Meanjin's standard contributor fee. So a very good one there.
Yep.
We also
I entered that one year, actually.
Oh,
I didn't do any good, but I did enter it.
Well, I thought you got to be in it to win it. And if you didn't win it then, you might win it this year or might win it next year.
Yeah.
Well, I like the title of this next one. It is the Little Black Dress Spooky Story Competition.
Oh.
So the KSP Writers Centre presents the annual Little Black Dress Spooky Story Competition. Listen, I don't know how they got that one together. Sponsored by Little Black Dress Productions. Well, there you go. Just answer my own questions. So, yeah. Now, the judges will be looking for good quality, original, unpublished stories with engaging characters and a compelling narrative, including an excellent beginning, middle, and end. Now, entries must be rated PG and should address the set theme. The theme in this instance for this year's competition is Best Friend. Now, entries close on the 24th of March, and now the word limit is, if you're a youth, so I'm guessing youth counts someone under 18, the word limit is 500. Now, if you're an adult, it's 1,200 words. Now, you can only have one entry per adult. However, it's unlimited entries. So there you go. I don't know how that works. But anyway, if you're under 18 or youth, it is free. Adults, it is $10 per entry. So prize. WA adult first prize is $100. Certificate, complimentary copy of Spooky Story Anthology. And the WA youth prize, $100. Certificate, complimentary copy of Spooky Story Anthology. And Youth Interstate Award, $50. Certificate, complimentary copy of Spooky Story Anthology. There we go. So, definitely have a look into that. We've also got one ending on the 31st of March, and this is Art and Words Project 2022, Northern Beaches Writers Competition. So, calling all writers to submit short stories with a tree theme for this competition. Entries must include at least one image that reflects and enhances the story. Stories can be non-fiction, fiction, or fiction inspired by true events, and all genres and styles are welcome. So the theme once again is tree. It closes on the 31st of March. The entries, word limit is 2,500 words. There is an entry fee of $15. First prize is $100 plus publication. Second prize, $50 plus optional publication, as well as the Northern Beaches Commendation Award. That's for Northern Beaches residents only, though, is $25 plus optional publication. So a little bit of a special award there for any of those people lucky enough to live on the beautiful Northern Beaches. However, the actual competition is open to everybody for the main prize. And one last one I'd like to quickly spotlight for this period, for this wonderful month of March. And this one, again, this short story competition ends on the 31st of March also. It is called the Caterpillar Poetry Prize. Now, the Caterpillar Poetry Prize is an annual prize for an unpublished poem written by an adult for children aged 7 to 11. So every year since 2015, the Caterpillar Poetry Prize has been awarded to a single poem by a single judge. Theme, so it's going to be poetry written by an adult for children aged 7 to 11. So as long as it fits into that demographic, I guess the subject matter is open to, again, that endless sky and universe. And word limit of 150 lines. Now, this, I understand, is maybe an international one because it is showing as €14 entry fee with a €1,000 prize money. So have a look into it. See if you're an avid poet and feel like you want to get your entry in there and take on the world, because I'm guessing this is a bit of a global competition, then by all means, the Caterpillar Poetry Prize could be your opportunity to shine and bring a spotlight on our awesome Australian talent. That's just a brief snippet of some of the short story competitions. Those are the ones that are ending in March, so you've got to jump to those ones real quick. There's a whole lot more there. Please visit writerscentre.com.au. You'll find all of the listings. Obviously, each one has a link there so you can learn more about the short story contest. So we've got festivals, we've got the International Writers Week, or Adelaide's Writers Week coming up. We've got, all these competitions. Yes, there's the world's going crazy. It's turning upside down. It's getting wet somewhere and dry in other areas. And, we've got the madmen on the loose somewhere up in the northern hemispheres. However, there's also the opportunity for some truly literary magic. So why not? Let's get it going. And that is my news for episode 48.
Good news.
Yes, hopefully.
It just feels like there's more energy in the industry at the moment, long lists and festivals happening and people starting to get out and about again. So despite it still being a little bit tricky and not quite as free as we'd like, there is a bit more energy in the industry.
I think so. And similar to, let's have a look at the first short story I was talking about, which was the Tales from the Pandemic. So, talking about the wanting to capture the tempo of the time that we're currently living in while it's still fresh and preserved for the future. But I think, as we're all sort of navigating these new days, these new directions and unknown landscapes, it's a really good opportunity to look inward and outward. So to look inward to how we've experienced all this, but also, by writing it, it gives other people the opportunity to discover, how other people have seen this, this very unique time in history. So what better time to read other people's, experiences, or even just get out there and be part of the conversation, because that's how the stories come about. And, a lot of times it's just verbal. But, yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a big energy. I think maybe, from the darkness comes the embers of something new, and those embers are turning into flames now. And, if there's one thing human beings do best, and that is expression and art, because otherwise, realistically, what else is there? I know there's basics like food, survival, medicine, science, and all that. Yeah, however, that we celebrate our existence on this planet usually through art in some form or another. So maybe now is a time, maybe it's just one of those weird moments in our timeline where art is resonating through us all, or at least seeking a way of a way to express itself through us all, whether it be music and writing or art of performance, whether it just be solid conversations over a beer or a coffee and reaching out to other human beings. But yeah, I think you're right. There's energy out there.
And for some people, it is a bit of everything. Their creativity comes in many forms, many varieties, and that is the case with the guest author that we have today. And I had a lovely chat with Mary Lou Stevens. So Mary Lou was born in Tassie. She studied acting at the Victorian College of the Arts, and she played in bands in Melbourne, Hobart and Sydney. Then she got a job in radio. She was a presenter, music director with commercial radio, then the ABC. She wrote a memoir. She played all over Australia, and she, with her husband, and a hive of killer native bees. And we chat to her about lots of the adventures that she had. And reinventing herself. It says on her website, when one door closes, another one opens, and she was going to throttle the next person that told her that. However, they were right. So while she'd been playing in bands and touring and releasing CDs, she really wasn't getting anywhere. And then, after sort of a string of jobs, then she went to radio, and then she went into writing and started quite late in life. Yet with that experience and that kind of years under your belt, I guess, for sure, she has a great deal of honesty in her books. And while we talked a little bit initially about The Last of the Apple Blossoms, and, tell you about that in the interview, but it's a fantastic story about natural disasters, personal calamities, and the collapse of the apple industry down in Tassie. But there's also her book, I was going to say Sex, Lies and Videotape, but that's not quite right.
Sex, Drugs and Meditation.
That's the one. Sex, Drugs. Sorry, Mary Lou.
Well, that's the book that I was drawn to.
Yes.
Being that, it's about addictions to food, drugs, alcohol, string of failed love affairs, and the breakup of the band she thought was really going to make it. That's something I can definitely relate to.
it was really interesting chatting to her and then hearing her talk about what the feedback that she got about the memoir. And it made me think about how courageous people are to actually share their vulnerability. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a memoir or biography or, something like that, because I believe that even in fiction, there is a lot of autobiography that writers put in. They put in their experiences. That's the best thing that they can write about, people that they know or things that they've done. And it did make me think about how engaging characters are usually the ones that you can share that emotion or that sensation, and sort of takes me back and links into a lot of the stuff I do as a coach, which is encouraging people to be confident, to understand their strengths and those kind of things. So there's a book written by Brené Brown, who is a social researcher and thought leader, and she's got a book called Daring Greatly, which has been out for quite a while now. Had a look on Goodreads, and she's got 10,825 reviews.
Oh, my Lord.
And 168,000 ratings. So it's a really good book. I've got it and I've got things tabbed, and I've bought copies for other people and all sorts of things. And I have actually met Dr. Brown. I met her in Melbourne when she came and spoke, and I was at a luncheon for business chicks, I think. So, yeah, Emma Isaacs brought her out. In Daring Greatly, this is from the Goodreads, she challenges everything we think we know about vulnerability. And based on 12 years of her research, she argues that vulnerability is not weakness, but rather our clearest path to courage, engagement, and meaningful connection. I think that is absolutely right.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when I think of vulnerability, or should I say, when I think of what a lot of us feel makes us vulnerable, or may make us vulnerable, a lot of times I think those things that we feel we can't reveal, or we shouldn't, in a society setting, maybe things that we've got to sort of keep to ourselves. But then when you allow yourself to be vulnerable for a moment and maybe reveal some of those things that you think you're not supposed to reveal, it turns out everyone's got the exact same things. There's a way, like you said, it brings in that engagement, because you go, oh, you feel that way as well. Or, it's like it's funny, the one thing that, not the one thing, but the things often that we feel we shouldn't reveal about ourselves or let the world know about, turns out everyone's hiding those exact same things, if that makes sense. But, and that's where I think, why when you allow yourself to be that vulnerable, and that's, of course, in no way meaning weak or anything like that, but by allowing vulnerability to come in, I think sometimes that's where you can build those real strong connections, because you really get in deep with somebody else, and you share the experience on a much deeper level. So I think so. But you did inspire me to have a look into a little bit about, writing and vulnerability, because it's something that I'm always trying to learn how to do. And, not that I've written a biography by any means. Mine's all horror and sci-fi and dystopian, but still, as you mentioned, the characters, that are going to allow the reader to sort of really understand the vulnerability, they're the ones that may resonate the best. And I think that's an art form that, I hope to be learning, and perfecting for the rest of my life, realistically. But I did stumble upon, doing a bit of research, I stumbled upon a good way of putting it. And this is from a website called writingcooperative.com. I'll just read you a very little excerpt, and the title of this excerpt is "Writing is an Act of Vulnerability." So it reads, "There is vulnerability in the writing process, even if I don't share my words with anyone else. This is because writing can be therapeutic, and therapy sessions can be painful work. Good writing requires honesty. It is a process where examination of oneself means looking deeply into one's heart, where there is an examination and re-examination of one's thoughts. It is a subjection to self-criticism. It is also a place to find forgiveness of self and others. Honesty is needed to understand the ugliness as well as the beauty within oneself and the world. Good writing requires a lot of soul-searching, pain, and strength. Ernest Hemingway expressed this well when he said, 'There is nothing to writing. All you do is sit down at a typewriter and bleed.'" So that was from writingcooperative.com. But yeah, I think that made me ponder for a moment that I guess that is a feature of writing that maybe writers have, obviously, if you're writing, you're writing, in the sense of analyse situations or analyse a single thought from a lot of different perspectives, or you may be investigating a character's action, but that can bleed through to normal life where, you know, one moment in time may be examined from so many different ways, based purely on the fact that we're so quick to self-edit or to
Aren't
look
we
into
just?
things. Yeah, so boy, oh boy, that's that can come with it many treasures, and it can bring a lot of sleepless nights and existential dread too. But but I think honesty is all about is the main feature of vulnerability, isn't it?
Yeah, and I did lots of research about the vulnerability bits and pieces as well. And there was a nice piece on Medium by Alexander Boswell, and that was from July 8, 2020. And he had some practical tips for writing with vulnerability about, you know, learn to write your truth. So vulnerability being the quality or state of being exposed to the possibility of being attacked or harmed, either physically or emotionally. Some really strong things happening there. And as a reader, he describes this quite well. This is what works for me. So think back to the last piece of writing you read, which gave you the feeling of almost experiencing the thoughts of the author as they came, the feeling of being in that author's shoes or the characters, even just for a brief time. And that gives you that sense of connection to them. And for me, that was the deeper connection that humans need for family, for community, for the rest of the species. And I thought, that's really good, and leaves your reader with a lasting impression of you and your world. So, it was very nice. So thank you. That was pretty handy, Alexander. The other person I had to read also on Medium. I do trawl through that from time to time. And this is from Logan Haney. He was a bit earlier in 2020. And the article was why it's important to express vulnerability in your writing. I often get my clients, my coaching clients, to write. And even if they're not writers, to start to record their thoughts or the things that they're grateful for, or the things that worry them. And there is something about the exercise of putting pen to paper and seeing the words come out on the page that helps express that vulnerability. And there is that honesty, as you say, about putting the words, because what's the point of lying to yourself? And then once you've done that, you begin to realise that other people are experiencing those same emotions and anxieties and all those kind of things. And it does let us take a deeper look at ourselves. And we need to do that, not every day, not every minute of every day, but it's incredibly helpful because it helps us, it reminds us of our values, the things that are important to us. And those things come through in our fiction writing as well as our non-fiction stuff. You know, it really, the characters that you most connect with are the ones that are most like you. And I think those come through really authentically. And your readers get that because it's honest, and it's hard to write contrary to your values.
Well, sometimes you have to, don't you? But
otherwise it'd be really boring, because let's face it, you and I are pretty nice people.
But
we wrote just about it. So how is it that you do that? And then I started to get into, so how do you write characters? And I was looking at Kate Allen, so KM Allen, one of our authors and one of the 6 a.m. Oz writers, and she had, this is a slight, pivot, 7 tips for creating awesome characters. And this is from one of her blogs, and her blog is on kmallen.com. 7 tips for creating awesome characters, as well as perfect the voice, give them the distinctive dialogue, create individual mannerisms, ramp up the relatability. So there's the vulnerability or the emotion, paint them in shades of grey, back them up with a backstory, make them consistent and believable. So if you're a writer, don't forget to do those things as well.
Or get really good sunglasses so no one can see your eyes, go to the city, sit down with a coffee on a bench in a really busy spot and watch.
Oh, right, yes.
And just see all the characters coming past, yes.
Yeah. And do you put words in their head when you do that?
No, I try. When I do that, it's more a case of trying to absorb how many completely unique experiences of life are all bundled together, and try to imagine back. You create, false histories for each person you see, because essentially you're just mucking around building characters in your head.
Yeah.
However, when you've got so many people in one spot and you just realise, wow, who knows? Someone may have grown up a Satanist since they were 6 years old, and this other person may, be addicted to painting, and you know what I mean? It's just, or different viewpoints of seeing life, and you think, wow, it kind of hits you like a hammer. It's like, well, I've got a couple of strong views on life, as you do going through life, and I realised, well, they don't mean nothing because there's a million other ones walking past on any given day, and that's very humbling, I think, for me at least, and makes me sort of. It allows me to get a bit of a sense of humour of this existence, because I realise that you can't get all the answers. So it can be fun. I don't want to come across as creepy though. So if you see me.
So if you're out at the Adelaide Writers Festival and you see a slightly creepy-looking guy giving out leaflets about Australian book lovers, it's not Darren.
I'm not imagining you as a Satanist with secret tattoos and you're going to go and kill someone later that afternoon. Not at all. No. But no, I think writing about vulnerability, there is a quote from Who magazine. Mm-hmm. They did a quote about Mary Lou Stevens' Sex, Drug, Meditation book. But I think the quote also sort of wraps things up quite uniquely about vulnerability in life. And so the quote is very short. It says, funny, sage, insightful, and just a little bit twisted.
Yes.
I thought, yes, that's about right. That's about,
I did like that one. I talked to her about that. Yeah.
And I do, hand on heart, listeners, I do really have a deep understanding of vulnerability, because, when we come to existential situations and what it means to be a biological human being, and the softness of my skin and the bone, because every now and then my cat Bobby will roll over and make it look like he does want a tummy pat. And I know that there is a thin line there now. I feel very vulnerable as I slowly put my hand further down, thinking, is he going to want a pat today, or is today the day he needs to just, sharpen up those claws and get a bit of blood? And 9 times out of 10, the pat lasts for about 2 seconds, and then I've got new scars to wear for the week.
There you go.
So, yes, but there's that moment of vulnerability where I realise, as tough as I am in the gym and in all my imaginations, here I am worried about my flesh as it goes towards Bobby to give him a bit of a tummy rub. And there we go. So,
there you go.
Yes. I don't
Tell
know
me,
how
do you
that goes
have...
into Mary Lou Stevens' interview, but...
Yes. Tell me, favourite book that has touched you in a way that you feel there's been that sense of vulnerability, or you've connected with it because it felt familiar?
Put me on the spot there. I'm just thinking now. Yeah.
Well, while you're thinking, let me tell you about some of the books.
Please do. Yeah, definitely.
that I've got.
That you've done.
So one recent one is The Hush by Sarah Foster. So short blurb, multi-generational female-led thriller and terrifying conspiracy that goes right to the heart of the British government. The reason that it really connected to me, it's about a midwife, and it's about women having babies and the government taking away their choices, something that I've advocated for as a midwife and as a mother all my life. And even now, working with a couple of great midwives who've got a tremendous app called Talking Birth, which is about informing women and giving them the opportunity to have their own advocacy. And so that is important because, women can be in such vulnerable spots. So that's a book that really I connected with. Fight Like a Girl, Clementine Ford, completely different stories, a little bit autobiographical. Clementine shares some really vulnerable times in her lives and talks about feminism and, her life standing up, call to arms, and that's some amazing stuff. And that really connects again, in my own way, endeavouring to live a life that advocates for women and the courage it takes to stand up to some of those things. And there was another one, Daughter of the River Country by Diane O'Brien, written with Sue Williams. And so that was Diane was a victim of the stolen generations. And this was an amazing memoir of abuse and survival, but ultimately hope. And so that was just brilliant. And it just affected me as you read it. You think, this woman has had so much and yet got herself up time and time again, and the optimism and hope, and now she's doing some amazing stuff. So yeah, that's just a couple of stories.
Well, I can definitely think of one. Now, you'll have to forgive me. It's literally on the spot, so I'm not going to cheat and try and Google or anything.
I will while you're talking.
I think it was called, it may have been called Silent Scream. I know it had the word scream in the title. It was a non-fiction book by an author, a lady who basically explored, the root causes for the drug problem. And she also explored the various ways different governments approach the situation. But what really hit me, and literally, it's one of those books that became a pivotal moment in time that actually changed the way, a bit of the way I look at the world for in a permanent way, as in removed a completely old system, which was obviously false from my behalf, and replaced it with something that was proper. But the long story short is this author so eloquently drew or put together that bridge that we probably would much rather not travel across or look at. But I say bridge because it's kind of, in a way, you had to walk in other people's shoes to understand the bridge. But that link between what can be such a horrible introduction to life, so, that's out of your hands, sexual abuse, violent abuse, psychological abuse, those things that happen that you just don't want to happen to people, the link between that and the drug abuse, especially in the sense of heroin and opiates, in the sense of, that this link that so many people that, this is the book's theory, that do find themselves addicted to heroin are people that have been robbed of the ability to feel comfort, to feel safe, to feel warm, to feel loved at some point in their growth. And so for them, that drug that's why it becomes addictive, because that is a whole thing that, I take for granted. I felt loved as a child, and I felt, there was, you feel safe in your mum's arms, your dad's arm, you feel safe in the comfort of your bedroom. I can't imagine having that, not having that at all, of being terrified for the first 10 years of my life, or, never knowing where I'm going to be sleeping the next day, all those things. And so it was really fascinating, but it was fascinating because the author really brings the reader into the lives of a lot of these addicts. And, you see, like I'd like to say, you peer behind the curtain, and you realise how out of whack a lot of our systems are when it comes to punishment, in the sense of, because obviously the drugs at the top of the chain, they're influencing governments because they're that rich. So they've got no worries about getting arrested. But it's the victims that have already been a victim that has led them to offered to that path, and then they become a victim again, and it was very interesting, and it made me look at drug addiction or any sort of addiction that tries to fulfill that sense of warmth and love and happiness in a whole brand new light. So it's a very powerful book, and definitely something that touched me. For the life of me, can't remember. I wish I could. I think she was a New York author. But
it was called Silent Scream.
I think Silent Scream, although that could be the Slayer song. But there is a Slayer song called Silent Scream, but it definitely had the scream in the title. One of them, So there we go. So it revealed the vulnerabilities of drug addicts, or drug addiction, should I say, rather than highlight, just government initiatives and all that. It actually, I guess, put a human face, but not only put a human face, but showed an almost clinically testable link. That horrible bridge that you need to walk across, going back in time, and to see the effect that child abuse can bring, basically. It does echo loudly and throughout someone's life. And, when you realise that it's almost, I think if I remember correctly, almost 90% of addiction or people addicted have had some sort of child abuse. That's just, and you can't look away from that statistic. But what it also does is, next time you see a junkie, asking for $5 or $1 or something like that. When I say junkie, I don't mean in a derogative way, but as in next time you see a drug addict, it's, it just made me realise that, it's just not a drug addict at all. It's somebody that's, has not had a fair introduction to this life, from when they first.
Is it called Chasing the Scream?
Yes, that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, so Chasing the Scream, The First and Last Days of the War on Drugs by Johann Hari. If I can get my eyes. Yes, Hari.
I think that's the one. Yeah. But anyway, so that vulnerability, revealing the vulnerability and giving me a different way of looking at things. So that was a bit of a heavy one, but it was a very profound book. It was a very profound revelation. I think, we all kind of have an idea that that's the case, but if we really did, would we be, stigmatizing it and making it such a, we make addiction such a vulnerability that most people want to hide.
Yeah.
When
Look,
the reality
it's interesting.
is we should be looking into it.
Was listening to an audiobook on my walk today. It was another one of Carey Greenwood's Phryne Fisher mysteries. She does this great thing where she does a little bit of accidental teaching, and before you know it, you've learnt something, whether it's about 1928 Melbourne or something completely different. They were talking in the book about writing prostitutes into stories, and the fact that despite it being a long time since Shakespeare, most books at that time still had prostitutes being the fallen women who eventually came to a bad end kind of thing, and that's how they all did. Yet what this gentleman was saying, who was doing his master's, was that a lot of prostitutes pay off their debt or get married to one of their customers or, change their luck in lots of ways, and they don't die any quicker than the normal population. They don't commit suicide any quicker than, a general population. Yet books that presented that wouldn't get published because the publishers don't like that. They at that time particularly were powerful, rich men generally running those big publishing companies, and so
there's another word for them too,
Yeah, it's polite. We're being polite though, Darren.
Yeah, it starts with a C, and it is customers. Because that always makes me laugh when prostitutes are shown or are shone in a bad light, because it's like their survival is based on customers. And who are the customers? The same ones that would turn around and say,
that's exactly
hey, that's
right.
naughty. It's like, well, it's easy fix. Stop going in there and giving them your money.
Yeah. It was interesting, though, to see the different perceptions and why we persist in thinking that, people who have an addiction to drugs or other bits and pieces, we see them as this stereotypical, but as soon as you get under one person and, make the contact with one person and share that vulnerability, you're right, it's there. Yeah, anyway, we could go on for hours. Let's go to Mary Lou, because she has some fascinating things to say.
Absolutely, but I just want to say
that.
1928 Melbourne, I think that was a very famous day. That was one of the days where many of the people stopped in the city. They looked up to the sky and wondered, why aren't we in Adelaide? Okay, so...
I don't think so. No.
Oh, I think so, yes.
We were
from
still
that
way
day,
better.
there's been regret and envy. I think you obviously had a fantastic time with Mary Lou Stevens.
It was a really good chat. I
love
loved listening to her, yeah.
Apologies for all of our side rants and segues there, and from heroin addiction to tummy rubs, I apologise. But yes.
Time now to listen to Mary Lou Stevens, the author of The Last of the Apple Blossom and Sex, Drugs and Meditation, amongst other things. Off we go.
Sounds great.
So welcome everybody to the Australian Book Lovers author interviews, and I am absolutely thrilled to have with me today Mary Lou Stevens. She is the author of The Last of the Apple Blossoms, as well as some other fabulous books, or another fabulous book which we might chat about a little bit later. Welcome, Mary Lou.
Thank you so much, Veronica. It's lovely to be here. I love everything that you do for Australian authors, and I'm really grateful for the podcast and the website and everything.
It's lovely of you to say. Thank you very much. Now, Mary Lou, you've been all over Australia, and I wanted to say that currently today I am in Victoria, and I'm on the lands of the Woiwurrung mob, who are part of the Wurundjeri Nation. Where are you coming from today?
I'm in Hobart at the moment, which is Palawa land. Usually I live, I was born and raised here, but these days I live on the Sunshine Coast, which is Gubby Gubby Cubby Cubby land.
There's a lot of toing and froing despite the lockdowns and the various things we have. So I'm glad that you are safe and well and looking forward to some events, which is just, we look on slightly jealously from Victoria and New South Wales, but that's all okay.
Look, I am so grateful because the day after my book was released, we went into lockdown in southeast Queensland and everything was cancelled and postponed. And I'm just so grateful that I was able to shift all my events in Tasmania to October and made it down here.
Which is fantastic.
It's such a juggling act these days. So I have many, many friends who are authors who haven't been able to have any in-person events. And I think we're just also grateful that online events and podcasts have done such a great job for all of us.
And really been able to fill the gap. Yeah, I was listening to the Garrett podcast this morning, and Astrid Edwards is the host. I can't remember who she was chatting to, somebody who had been in and out of readings and publishing and book selling and those kind of things. And she was, again, talking about how difficult it was for authors not to have that launch for their baby, no matter how long it had taken them to get that work out in the world. That it just is a turning point, isn't it? It's a line in the sand where you kind of need to jump over and say, here is my fabulous creation.
I said to my husband when we got locked down, I said, I'm just going to be really sad for a few days. And it's nothing about you. It's nothing personal. I'm just going to be really, really sad for a few days.
Yeah. And I am really thrilled that I'm hosting a book launch for one of our authors, E.J. Dawson, who actually lives not far from me. So we're in regional Victoria. We could potentially meet at a cafe. But again, she's years of getting the book together, and she's with a independent publisher, but they're in the US, and it's just so difficult. But we've been able to put something together online. So I'm really glad that you are down in the beautiful Apple Isle.
Yes, I am.
You began down there, and they've travelled all over the place, and I'm going to bring that up. But let's get back to your book. What inspired you to write The Last of the Apple Blossom?
I wish I knew, Veronica.
Because then you do it again, right?
Yes, I would. It was one of those things. This is the fourth novel I've written, the first one to find a publisher, and it's very different to anything that I have written before. The idea totally took me by surprise. I had done an in-person event with Monica McInerney. This was back in 2017, and I've interviewed her many times over the years, and in this interview, we spoke a lot about how grief informs her writing. And that very afternoon, I had this idea for a book that starts on the day of the 1967 bushfires in Tasmania and traces the demise of the apple industry through the eyes of two women on neighbouring orchards. And I just went, what is that? And who do you think you are? Judy Nunn? This is such a Judy Nunn book. I bet she's writing it right now. Thankfully she wasn't.
Luckily, yes.
I went, I have no idea where that came from. Now, a little later on when I started researching it, I realised that 2017 was the 50th anniversary of the 1967 fires. So something in my psyche must have just been bubbling away, or in the collective unconscious or something. I mean, there was a lot of information and memorial publications and things going on in Hobart for the 50th anniversary. But of course, there was nothing in southeast Queensland where I was living. But something in me must have just clicked, and this idea came to me. And I went, okay. All right, this is going to take a lot of research.
and there it is. So for anyone that is unaware of the book, The Last of the Apple Blossoms is a family saga, late historical, and a brief description is 2 orchards, 2 women, and the secret that binds them. It's a sweeping, big-hearted Australian family saga for readers of Judy Nunn and Victoria Perman. When I heard your little reading that you did for us with the Australia Reads book, I was just taken back to the Huon Valley, and having spent a couple of years down there myself in Tassie, it was just so evocative of, you could so easily pop yourself back in that place. Tell me about your experience in the Huon Valley.
Well, I grew up in Hobart. So as a kid, we all used to go down the Huon Valley for school excursions. We'd, traipse through the apple orchards and the picking sheds and the cool rooms and all that kind of stuff. And also my family had a tradition of Sunday drives. It was such a thing when I was growing up, the Sunday drive. And I was one of 6 kids, and we would take it in turns to choose where we would go on these. We used to actually call it a Sunday choice. So it was, one of us would have the choice of where we'd go on that Sunday. And quite often we would find ourselves, well, especially in spring when all the apple blossom was out, down the Huon Valley. And we certainly weren't alone because tourist buses used to go down there in spring because it was such a beautiful sight. The whole place was just blanketed in apple blossom. Sadly, no longer the case. But, back then it was lovely.
Tell me about the 1967 bushfires. Obviously, Australians are very familiar with bushfires. And I admit I was chatting to a friend just before, we were going to have our chat. And I said, I have to get off. I'm talking to this lady. And she said, I remember Mum sending stuff down there in 1967. So she has relatives down there in Hobart, still does, but she remembers how devastating it was. And she said, I remember Mum sending over parcels of clothes and things. So tell me a little bit about the bushfires and the research that you did behind that.
Well, I remember the 1967 bushfires. I was 6, and anyone who went through that bushfire, and indeed any bushfire of that magnitude, I don't think you ever forget it. And I have forgotten a lot of things. My memory is really not the best. I turned 60 this year, so I'm a debut novelist.
Welcome to the club.
Oh, lovely. It's a good year.
It is a great year.
I'm a debut novelist at 60. And I was 6, and first day of grade 1. So the opening chapter is actually based on my memories. Catherine is a young school teacher, and that's where where The Last of the Apple Blossom starts, at Sandy Bay Infant School, where I was a student. The memories of us taking our uniforms off and lying on the linoleum floor just to try to keep cool, and parents coming to pick us up, or the teachers getting us home when the school was evacuated. And I think it's chapter 3 where we arrive at the last safe home on Mount Nelson, and that was our family home. So I remember the lounge room full of kids and the kitchen full of mums, and not really knowing what was going on. And all the dads and fathers were up Mount Nelson trying to save their homes with wet gunny sacks and garden hoses. And nobody knew whether there'd be dads or homes to go back to at the end of the day. It was an inferno. And anyone who's been through it, or you never forget the really, really dark skies and the enormous sun. It's like being on an alien planet. The sun is so big and so red, and it's really the only thing that you can see because visibility just disappears, and and the heat and the wind and the roaring. So a lot of that is in the book. But I also did a lot of research because it was the 50th anniversary in 2017. There were a lot more oral histories, and they set up video booths and recording booths in 2017 so people could tell their stories. And the local paper down here did a 6-week retrospective on the whole thing. What I found much harder, though, Veronica, was the aftermath. So The Last of the Apple Blossom starts in 1967, but the bulk of the book covers the following 10 years through to about 1977. So finding information on how the whole restructuring scheme and charitable schemes and funding and all that kind of stuff, that was actually really hard to get until I found a fabulous book called Bushfire Disaster, and it was actually written as a kind of warning of what to do and what not to do in a natural disaster. And in that book, there's a quote from one of the big fire experts at the time, and he says that at the height of the blaze, the energy was the equivalent to 3 atomic bombs.
Wow.
That's how fierce it was. And this fire only really lasted 5 hours. And in 5 hours, over 60 people died.
Gosh.
And 7,000 people were left homeless. And Hobart nearly burnt to the ground. So many of the suburbs in Hobart were badly affected. And the CBD itself, the the centre of Hobart was in danger of burning to the ground as well, except there was a late change in the wind, and that's all that saved it.
Goodness. Bushfire is amazing. I live in the Macedon Ranges where, we had the Ash Wednesday bushfires and we quite often get grass fires every year that start off and it brings back that anxiety of fires and running and who do you save, and you have your go bag and you log in these days to the CFA websites and all those kind of things. But imagine in 1967, gunny sacks fighting and, standing with the buildings of the CBD behind you and thinking it's all over. Is it any wonder that those things leave scars?
They even let the prisoners out of Riston Jail to help fight the fires. And kids were trying to fight the fires as well. And because the poles and the phone lines went down, so there was no communication at all.
No, it's not like these days where we're so much closer. You've taken that as your opening event, but you've woven a family and renewal into it. So tell us, without giving away the spoilers, of course, we don't want to, tell us a little bit about your main character.
Well, Catherine Turner is a young school teacher. She grew up on the family orchard at Wattle Grove, which is just outside of Cygnet in the Huon Valley. And but she always wanted to run the orchard, and her brother Peter wanted to become a vet. But back in those days, the son was expected to take over the family orchard. Catherine really wasn't given much of a choice of what she could do, especially in the 60s. It was either be a secretary, a nurse, a teacher, or work in a shop. So she chose to be a teacher. So she is a young teacher on the day where this book opens, and she rushes back home against all odds and finds out that the orchard is in ruins. The family home has burnt down and her brother has died. So she vows to rebuild the orchard and the family business, because back then a family could make good money out of 10 acres of apples. Certainly wasn't the case for much longer after that. But her father is absolutely against it because women don't run orchards. They didn't run orchards. No. The wives could run the packing sheds. The wives would usually run the packing sheds, but the men ran the orchards and made all the big decisions. So there's quite a lot of friction between Catherine and her dad. And sometimes I've had people kind of texting me or messaging me on Facebook while they've been reading the book and going, Catherine's father, oh, he's so horrible. Oh, he's nasty. And it's like, well, he was a man of the times.
Yes.
And also he had a lot of grief. His son had died in the fire. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. Catherine actually does give up her teaching job, and takes a while to tell her dad actually that's what she's done. But eventually she actually has to go back to teaching. And this was a very common thing, and has been for a long time with primary producers, that often the wife or someone else in the family would actually have to have a day job to support the farm or the orchard.
Yeah.
And that's what Catherine ends up doing, but locally. But meanwhile, her best friend, Annie, lives on the orchard next door. So she is the wife of an orchardist. She does run the packing shed during the season. So she and Dave have a much bigger orchard, and it's not so badly damaged. They do lose a few buildings. Catherine actually helps with the packing during their season. And there's a friend of Dave's who's come down from Melbourne with his young family, hoping for just some time out from his life in Melbourne. But his wife has disappeared. She's run away. And so Mark is looking after their young son, Charlie. And Catherine forms this beautiful friendship with this young boy who does remind her a lot of her younger brother, who she misses so badly. And Charlie, the young boy, is in need of a lot of love and care. He's had a pretty tough upbringing. So they form this beautiful bond, which of course brings Mark into the picture. So Catherine and Mark become close, but even though his wife's gone missing, he's still a married man, and this is a very small rural community.
In 1967.
Yes, in 1967. So it does cause a lot of problems for Catherine. Not so much for Mark because, it's a man's world, but for Catherine, And it's where she grew up and everyone knows her. So it does, lots of aspersions are cast and it does make it tough for her. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we might leave it there because we don't want to give away too much. Now, you had an interesting journey with this. Tell me, how long did it take you to write? And you had a fabulous mentor who we've already kind of mentioned.
It is a beautiful story. I do love telling it.
Good, tell us all.
So I spent a year researching this book because I knew nothing about growing apples, and certainly nothing about growing apples in the 60s and 70s, because apple growing techniques have changed dramatically since then. So there was a lot of research because I really wanted to get it right. I was born in the Apple Isle. I grew up here and it's part of our heritage, and I wanted to make sure that I got it right out of respect for the orchardists. And fortunately, quite a few of them have got back to me and said, yeah, you got it right.
So that's good.
Huge relief. But I was up to about draft 3 or 4. Look, like most authors, I have spent a lot of money learning how to write, Veronica. I've done master classes, I've done workshops, I've done retreats, I've done conferences, and I thought I really can't justify spending any more money on my writing with 3 unpublished manuscripts sitting there. And then I knew that this story was worth it. I knew it was actually worth spending some money on The Last of the Apple Blossom. And I was thinking, will I get another manuscript assessment? Will I work with another mentor? And I thought, I think a mentor for this one would be good. And I'm a member of the Australian Society of Authors, and they have a mentorship program. And I was looking through the list of authors, and I went down the list, and there was Monica McInerney.
Hooray!
And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. This idea had come to me after I'd interviewed her.
Yep.
And there she was, and I thought, this completes the circle. This is meant to be. I thought she'd be too busy, but she wasn't. She took me on. But she did say, I won't look at your manuscript until you've done 6 drafts.
Right.
And then I want you to write at least 10 drafts, because that's what she does.
Right.
So we worked on draft 6 through till 10 together. She was a hard task mistress. She knows that I say this about her, and she's happy about that. But she's also incredibly wise and generous and insightful and helpful, just all round wonderful. I want to be Monica McInerney when I grow up. She is an amazing human being. She's fantastic. So very generous to other authors, which I have found in Australia that authors really are very generous to each other.
It's a great community.
It really is.
Yeah.
And Monica just went way and beyond anything that she needed to. And by the time I got to the end of draft 10, she went, you've done it. This is the book that I wanted to read. I knew that you had it in you, and gave me her blessing.
Isn't that amazing to have the confidence and the backing of somebody of that ilk, and just to hear those words must have been just brilliant.
And to be quite honest, Veronica, I thought that I would be a shoo-in to get a deal straight away, because Monica thought this book was so good, and she wrote an endorsement for agents and publishers, and I thought, woohoo,
on my way.
No. I pitched to 6 agents. I got rejected by every single one.
Not to be.
No. So I'm just very grateful that in Australia you do not need an agent to get published.
So tell us about the publishing journey then.
Well, I'm a member of the Romance Writers of Australia as well. And last year the conference was online. So we were doing virtual pitches. And I always knew this book would be a really good fit for Harlequin. I just had this really good sense about it. So the only person I pitched to was Nicola Robinson from Harlequin. And it was on Zoom, except I had this ancient laptop that just kept on crashing on me. And I couldn't get the camera working. I'd done all this stuff on Zoom prior to it, but I couldn't get the camera working. And you don't get very long for a pitch.
No.
And it was just like, I tried everything and I thought, oh, Nicola just thinks I'm a complete idiot. Oh, this is such a bad way to start off a pitch. But anyway, we got there in the end. We just did it on the audio and we got there in the end. for this particular pitch, you actually had to send through a synopsis, and I think it was the first 3 chapters. I can't remember exactly. So she already had an idea of what it was about. She had read Monica's endorsement, and she asked to see the full manuscript.
Excellent.
So hurrah.
Hurrah, yes.
And she got back to me pretty quickly and said, we're interested. I need to take it to acquisitions. And I went, okay. And she said, it'll be next Tuesday. So this was on the Thursday, And she said, I'll take it to acquisitions next Tuesday. Anyway, and then she rang the next day and said, oh, I'm sorry. It won't be next Tuesday. It'll be the Tuesday after.
Oh,
and I thought,
luckily she rang.
I could have kind of contained my nervous anxiety for a few days, but for 10 days, this is going to be excruciating. But never mind, she's taking it to acquisitions. So this is really great. In the meantime, another publisher was reading it, and she was really keen on it as well, but she was on leave. She was actually reading it while she was on leave. She was saying, oh, I love this. So that was nice. After all the rejection I had.
After the 6 rejections, yes.
Oh, and then another publisher got in touch saying, will you send us the full manuscript? So it never rains, but it pours. It was in motion with Harlequin. And then I was heading out to book club that Monday afternoon. So the Monday after the Thursday phone call from Nicola saying I'm taking it to acquisitions. So it was Monday afternoon. I was just heading out the door to go to book club, and my phone rings and it's Nicola. And I thought, oh, I'd better answer this.
Yes.
So I did, and she said, we had a special acquisitions meeting this afternoon. This never happens, but it did happen today, and we'd like to offer you a deal.
Hooray! Oh, there you are.
Completely flabbergasted because I was kind of halfway out the door.
Yes.
And not expecting it. And
no, thinking another delay. Okay. Yeah.
it was just like, wow. Wow. Okay. Fantastic.
Brilliant. So when was this? What, how long between, yes, we want to make you an offer and the book is out?
It was a year.
A year.
Which is a fast turnaround for trad publishers. In fact, it was so fast that Nicola had to do the first round of edits, which usually doesn't happen, because their editorial schedule was already planned and booked. So the editor that I would have been working with was working on something else. So Nicola did the first round of edits because it's really quick. They usually like 18 months. I've got to say, Veronica, when I got my deal in August last year, I thought, oh, good, because this whole pandemic situation will be over by August 2020.
Oh, yes. Oh, no.
Meanwhile, a friend of mine had been picked up by a publisher before me, but wasn't getting published till 2022. And it was like, oh, you poor thing, having to wait so long. And now I'm saying to her, your publisher was really smart.
Yes, to wait.
Yeah. 2022, you'll be able to do in-person events.
Yeah,
absolutely. So, swings and roundabouts.
What is the best thing about holding that book in your hand?
Look, for me, it's just been such a labour of heart and soul and bone and blood and spirit and everything. It was a relief. It was just this massive sense of gratitude and relief that it was actually real, because I didn't really believe it was going to happen, because it has been such an uncertain time, and other authors I know, their releases have been pushed back and all kinds of stuff have happened. So to actually hold the book in my hand and go, it's happened, it's real, not even a pandemic and the world falling to pieces could stop this from happening. So it was an enormous sense of relief. And it's so beautiful. The cover is so beautiful.
It is magic. If anybody wants to have a quick look, go on the internet and have a look. It's just, it's hopeful. That's what I love about it. It just looks like there is going to be joy within those covers, despite the tragic beginning.
Yes, and the beautiful illustrated apple blossoms are repeated through the book at each of the chapter headings. At my Sunshine Coast launch, which was delayed by many, many weeks, so most people had already read the book by the time it was launched. But this beautiful woman, Fiona is her name, she brought her book up to be signed, and she had coloured in the title page and the beginning of each chapter with different colours, all these beautiful apple blossom. And I was speechless with delight. I think she was a bit overwhelmed at just how overcome I was, but it was this is the most beautiful thing. And I took photos and I sent it to Christine Armstrong, the cover designer, and said, "Have a look at this. Isn't this gorgeous?"
Oh, that is so lovely. To have that acknowledgement and the fact that I think reading is education, entertainment, all of those kind of things, enlightenment, emotional, and to have that recognised by one of your readers, that's beautiful.
I thought it was a lovely thing to do also in these times, because the colouring in has been proven to be really relaxing and grounding and like a meditation. So, you can read a book and colour in at the same time. I thought, what a lovely idea.
Very good. And now you give me a fabulous segue into another book that you've written called Sex, Drugs and Meditation.
Yes, that's my memoir. So that is set within the framework of the first silent 10-day meditation retreat that I did. And when I told people I was writing a memoir based around my first silent 10-day meditation retreat, they would kind of go, huh? That's going to be really boring. You can't talk to anyone. You can't even look at anyone, and you're sitting and meditating for 12 hours a day. What the? And it's the framework. So there's lots of flashbacks into my past. Mm-hmm. And also there's lots of stuff about the reactions that I have during that meditation retreat. And I used to be extraordinarily reactive, which is one of the reasons I did this. Mm-hmm. And my mind also would just kind of spin off in all kinds of directions. So that's all in the book. And what really surprised me is that shortly after it was published, I was contacted by a small television production company in Melbourne, and they wanted to turn it into a 6-part comedy series.
Okay.
And I rang my publisher and I said, this TV company wants to turn it into a comedy series. She said, yes, your book is funny. And I went, but that's my angst. No, that's my dreadful childhood. That's all the, the drug use. And I played in a lot of bands and, my broken hearts and my dysfunctional family and, all this stuff. And she went, yeah, and it's really, really funny.
Some of the fabulous reviews you've got there is funny, sage, insightful, and just a little bit twisted. So, yes, fantastic. Yeah. Bracingly honest, funny and rewarding, a book you can't put down. It is, I think, if you're vulnerable enough to share those reflections and the growth that you obviously had during that time, that is brilliant. And
well, it's interesting because I wrote it because I used to read a lot of self-help books, but I would kind of skim over all the technical stuff, and I would never do the suggested exercises.
Yes, you think, that wasn't a very good book, was it really?
But I'd be fascinated by the case studies. I would just read the case studies.
Right.
Because they would be stories, and they would be the hero's journey, and they'd be, that kind of storytelling that I think is just hardwired into us. I think it's part of our DNA, that storytelling. And so when my life changed and I found a husband and I saved my job all through meditation, I thought, this is a case study. I wonder if anyone would be interested in it. And I just put it through the open submission processes and scored a deal, they picked me out of the slush pile and went, oh, we really like this. So that's how I got that deal.
Fantastic.
But I will say, I first started writing it and I got some feedback from an agent, and she said, look, if you are going to write this, you need to get really, really honest. And I just completely freaked out. I was not ready. I put it aside. I wrote a novel instead that'll never see the light of day.
Okay.
And when I had done a lot more meditation and had a bit more distance from it and had got used to the idea of being really honest in this memoir, then I was able to write it. It took a while.
What do you think is the trigger for women of a certain age? Because your journey here sounds quite similar to some work that I did myself, and friends, we went off to the back of Queensland and did some very strange and wonderful retreats and odd things. But What is it you think that triggers the need for women of a certain age to turn themselves inward and have a look and see what it's all about?
I think it would be very different for most women than me because I've never had children of my own. I did help raise my niece. But I think women of a certain age are finally free of that particular role and always thinking about someone else first. And it's time. They have the time and also the need to get back in touch with themselves and nurture themselves. That's kind of a stereotypical answer because I think it's going to be different for everyone. For me, it was actually my work situation that just became impossible. And I also think that women get to a certain age and they have put up with enough, excuse me, I'm going to swear, they've put up with enough shit, you know, and they've really got to the end of it and gone, no, I'm not going to put up with this anymore. Yeah. I'm a human being. I have rights. I have power. I've been downtrodden. I've been taken for advantage of. I've been taken for granted. And now I need to do something for myself. For me, it was more like my dream job has turned into a nightmare. And thanks to all my time in 12-step programs, I knew I couldn't actually change the sociopath of a boss that I had or the whole system of bureaucracy that I was in. But I could change myself. Yeah. And that's why I did it. That's why I went off, because I was so unhappy in such a horrible situation. I loved my job, but it was becoming impossible to stay there. And so I thought, okay, if I'm going to stay in this job, which I love, I need to find a way for myself to
live
that.
with yourself and to live as yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a book that for me was incredibly useful around the I won't say the same because it's, a very different experience we all have, but it was Maureen Murdoch's The Heroine's Journey. As opposed to the hero's journey. Yes. And again, that, women do the journey a little differently and we want to fall out of that. Those reins that people put us in and the boxes that people put us in and go, yeah, it's not for me. So, I can absolutely understand the need to find something that worked for you. So that's fantastic. Yeah. You mentioned 4 books. So we've talked about The Last of the Apple Blossom. We've talked about Sex, Drugs and Meditation. What are the other 2 that I don't know about?
I wrote a sequel to Sex, Drugs and Meditation, which I was going to call Love, Death and Meditation. So it was the truth of the happy ending. So Sex, Drugs and Meditation does have a happy ending. I meet my husband and he's the man that I will marry. I actually found being married really tricky. I didn't get married to my early 40s and it was so different to anything else I'd ever experienced. And what happened for me is it brought up a lot of fear. It's the thing about soulmates, that a true soulmate is put in your path to kind of challenge you and help you break through certain patterns and help you, I'm going to use that word grow, but there it is, grow as a human being. They're not there to give you an easy life.
No.
They're there to help you kind of get to the next level, if you like.
Yeah.
And that was certainly the case with me. I was, oh gosh, Veronica, the stuff that my mind came up with, the amount of fear, just trying to push him away and push him away and push him away. Plus we had a lot of disasters. He got sued. We lost our house. We were completely broke. And so there was a lot of anger and resentment from me towards him. And I wrote that book to be the truth about the happy ever after. And my publisher was interested, but it didn't get through acquisitions. We'd already changed the title. I'd rewritten the beginning and the end, changed the title, but it didn't get through acquisitions. So I self-published that book because it was complete. It was done. So that's that one. So they're the only 3 books I've written that are out in the world. But I have written 3 other novels that will never see the light of day.
Okay.
And when Nicola signed me up, she said, so you've written other novels, would we be interested in any of them? And I just went, nope. No. Those were my practice books. I mean, most people... Most writers will have a practice book or 2. I'm just a bit of a slow learner. It took me 3 practice books.
Well, late starters, we're allowed to do that. Yep.
I learned a lot about writing, but they just weren't the right books.
The most useful writing advice you've ever been given, what was that?
Oh, I love this because I'm going to pay tribute to Fiona McIntosh. I did her masterclass several years ago. And she's an amazing supporter of everyone who does her masterclass. You know, earlier when I said I thought Judy Nunn would be writing a book set in the Huon Valley about the apple industry, it was actually Fiona McIntosh who was doing that.
She wrote the Lavender books, didn't she?
Yes.
She spoke at our local library,
she's got so many books out there. All her books sell a truckload. She's a best-selling author of so many books.
I love her fantasy the best, I'm going to say.
Sorry, what's that?
I love her fantasy the best. I took some really old tattered copies to when she was launching. It's not the Lavender Field, but it was something like that. And
the Lavender Keeper.
That's it.
Yeah.
And she was there at our local library in the days before COVID. And she goes, oh, my God, where did you find that? I said, I've read them and reread them. She goes, oh, fair enough. And she signed them for me. So that was lovely.
Well, they've all been re-released.
Yes, with new covers and all sorts of things, But I do treasure the ones that have got her name scribbled on for me. So,
Oh, good.
But tell me about her, sorry. Yep.
Yeah, so, well, I had written The Last of the Apple Blossom and I subscribed to her newsletter, and I'm trying to remember when it was. But anyway, she sent out a newsletter and it had all kinds of apple recipes in it. So I replied saying, oh, I'm loving these apple recipes because I've written a book set in the Huon Valley about a female orchardist. And she emailed me straight back and said, I'm doing the same thing. And I thought,
oh, no.
That's it. 3 years of my life, 2 years researching. 1 year researching, 2 years writing, all the money I spent with Monica, all down the drain. Because if I was a publisher, you know, would I publish Fiona McIntosh's book about the Huon Valley and apples, or some unknown author called Mary Lou Stevens with her book about the Huon Valley and apples? And I thought, well, that's it.
That's it.
I had this feeling the whole time I was writing this book that someone else would be writing it because it's such a great idea. Fiona's idea was slightly different to mine, but it was still a female orchardist in the Huon Valley.
Right. And
so we had a bit of a back and forth, and I was saying, well, I really want to read your book. So be it. And then she got back to me and she went, no. She said, no, I'm not going to continue with this book. I'm actually going to put it aside. I'm really happy to step aside and see your book shine. And it was
that amazing?
Extraordinarily generous. So beautifully generous of her. It just really blew me away. I think every aspect of this book has just been touched by the generosity of people, and including Monica McInerney and the woman I call my apple angel, who is a female orchardist, Naomi Clark-Port, down the Huon Valley, and she was extremely generous as well. And then Fiona just stepping away from her own apple book so that mine would get published. And she said, you know, let's revisit this in a year. If you still haven't found a publisher, then I might write mine. But as it was, I found a publishing deal, and she's been nothing but supportive of the whole process. And she really does. For everyone who does her masterclass, she's so supportive of them all the way. It doesn't matter how many years ago it was.
Right.
So, which brings me back to the piece of writing advice, which I absolutely love. So I had paid all this money to go to her masterclass and airfares and accommodation. It was in Adelaide. And I already had a memoir out there. So I was thinking, like, you know, and I'm a bit down the track. This is a masterclass, and I need to learn how to write fiction, which is why I'm here. The first thing she says in front of this room of hopeful authors is, nobody cares. The world does not need your book.
Oh, my goodness. Bet you could have heard a pin drop.
What? Of course the world needs my book. I'm already a published author. My memoir is out there. Of course the world needs, you know, my special skills and my unique insight and, you know, my fabulous way with words. But she's going, nah, nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Dear.
Nobody cares if you write a book or not. The world does not need your book. It was such an extraordinary thing to do for the opening line of a 5-day masterclass on writing fiction. And she then said, the less I care, the better I write. And I thought, I don't understand, because clearly she does care a lot about what she writes. Her research is amazing. Really couldn't work it out until later, when I got stuck with one of the books that will never see the light of day. And I was turning myself into knots and I was agonizing over it, and I got completely stuck. And then I remembered, nobody cares. And honestly, Veronica, it was as if this weight just went off my shoulders. It's like, nobody cares. Nobody cares about this book. Nobody cares what I write. I can write anything. And I immediately was able to start writing again. It was such an extraordinary piece of advice that I still remember, and not only with writing but with other things as well, because it kind of gets me out of that kind of knotty, twisty, stuck place that my mind can get into. And, you know, thinking that it's all so important and I am so important, and it just makes me miserable. And when I remember nobody cares, honestly, I just feel like laughing every time. It's like, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And what that does is it gets me out of that sticky, knotty, kind of self-centered, neurotic frame of mind, and opens me up to all kinds of different possibilities, and also improves my connection with other people, because I'm just not stuck in my own crap.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Nobody cares about my
because
crap.
nobody cares. No. Yeah, it's a little bit like an iceberg book, isn't it? Because you have the little 10% that's out there in the world, but it's the 90% that's there, which is, you know, emotions and strengths and experience and all of those other things that let you put that 10% out there. But, yeah, nobody really ever sees, or really wants to, by the sounds of it, see that 90%.
It's interesting because Nicola from HQ said, do you want to write an author's note about all the work that went into this book, all your research? And I went, I don't know, should I? And she said, yeah, I think so, because people who are interested will read it and people who aren't will just skim by it.
Yeah.
And it was really lovely just to have that acknowledgement of the amount of research and work that went into it. So if people are interested in a little bit extra, you know, more than just that 10% that pokes above the ocean, there is there. And I always read author's notes because I'm a writer and I'm fascinated about, you know, the whole writing process. But there certainly is, and I've been writing for over 13 years, you know, and fairly consistently. And usually I think that most people who get a book published have been probably doing the same thing. I have friends, you know, who didn't get published until their 10th manuscript. I have a friend who's a very successful romance author in the States, and she was writing for over 20 years before she got published.
Dedication.
Yeah, so people, you're right, people don't see a lot of that. They don't often know just how much goes into becoming a writer.
No, I have great admiration for I'll say the young ones, you know, who begin in this industry, you know, having had another career myself and then come to it late. It's interesting to unpack the layers and the connections and the relationships and how people begin in this industry and where they go. It's just fascinating.
Well, one of the questions I was asked a while ago is what advice would you have for your younger self as a writer? Or, you know, what would you like to tell your younger writer? And I said I wouldn't tell her anything. I want her to stay as naive and optimistic.
Yes.
And so convinced that her first novel is going to be this massive bestseller. It's the best thing ever written. I want her to keep all of that naive optimism. I know, because when we start out, so often many of us think that, you know, that this is the first book I write is this brilliant opus.
It's just going to break out and it'll be fantastic. Yes, it'll be a movie, it'll be a TV series, all of those things.
And I think you really need that when you start out because it's such a long process and so much work to write a book, and you need that to sustain you. And then when you've written that book, you know, and probably rewritten quite a few times, at least you have that experience behind you and you know what to expect. And then you can make an informed decision about whether that's something that you want to do again.
Yeah, that is a wise way to look at it. Let's just follow that up with, what advice would you give to authors listening to the podcast?
Writing is an act of faith for me, and I think for a lot of authors who aren't on multi-book contracts, it's just an act of faith. Faith is believing in something that you can't prove is real. And for an uncontracted author, that's what it's like. You write this book never knowing whether it will get published or not. And I just hope that authors hold the faith. Just if it's something that you love, and I absolutely love The Last of the Apple Blossom. I know why it took me so long to be able to write this book and why it took me so long to work on it and write it and rewrite it. 14 drafts by the end, because it did mean the world to me. It does mean the world to me. And I kept the faith, and it's out in the world, and I'm so incredibly grateful for that.
And you've had some great responses to the work. Tell us a little bit about what you've heard from readers.
I've had wonderful reviews, and I think my whole publicity team and Harlequin HQ were so totally thrilled when I was reviewed in The Australian recently, and it was a lovely review. And I have also received a lot of emails and social media messages, direct messages from women who lived through these times. Such a time for women between 67 and 77. So many changes. Women who've lived through the fires, women who had young kids like Annie in 1967, women who grew up on orchards or who had a family connection to orchards. The long involved emails I've had from them about their lives and how they're echoed in The Last of the Apple Blossom, that has been so beautiful to get these heartfelt emails from women who lived through those times. So they might not be, writing reviews on Goodreads or posting on social media. They're getting in touch with me personally to tell me how it affected them personally.
Yeah.
And thank you for writing this book, which is something I actually wasn't expecting, which has just been glorious. And there have been so many lovely reviews. So it's been interesting for me because my memoir came out in 2013 and it was a different world back then as far as social media was concerned. So I didn't have advanced reader copies going out in the world and, getting early traction. And Goodreads was around, but it wasn't as big as it is now. And was Instagram around in 2013? I just don't remember it being the thing that it is now, and all the bookstagrammers and the Instagram influencers. And for me to see people posting about this book and posting photos of it and posting reviews of it has been a completely new experience. And I marvel at it. I marvel that people have read my novel and that they're posting about it and they're talking about it online.
It's amazing. Readers are just brilliant people.
Yes. Yeah. And it
fantastic.
gives a book this whole other life that you can see unfolding in front of you. It's extraordinary.
What would you say for readers is the message or I guess for you, what is that core thread that goes through The Last of the Apple Blossom that you wanted to make sure readers got a sense of?
I think you picked up on it beautifully, Veronica, when we were talking about the cover and the sense of hope that's on the cover, because that's really one of the main things that I would like readers to step away from this book with, a sense of hope that no matter how bad things get, and things got very bad for the orchardists. The government was paying them to bulldoze their trees into the ground, trees that had been in the family for generations. But there is hope. There is a real theme of resilience. I kind of hesitate to use resilience because it has been used a lot in recent years. but
Yeah.
it's used a lot because we need it.
Yes.
And certainly Catherine has it in spades. Sometimes I wonder if she's just stubborn, because I know I'm very stubborn.
Yes, they say all writing is a little bit autobiographical, no matter how much we say it's fiction, yes.
And my husband's, will say I'm stubborn. But I like to think of it as resilience and perseverance. And Catherine has that in spades. But also it's love. So that's one of the main things in this book, and all different levels and kinds of love. Yes, you have this stonking great big romance that goes through the whole book, but there's also Catherine's love of Charlie, this young boy who really needs her in his life and she needs him. You've got motherly love, Annie and all her kids. You've got love of music. You've got love of the land. You've got love of the way of life that they have. All these different kinds of love. You have friendship, that kind of love. And so love and hope are what I hope readers take away from The Last of the Apple Blossom.
How could they not when it's set in such a beautiful place, and you obviously have put so much love and hope into it?
I will admit, Veronica, I cried buckets. Buckets. Every time I did, every time I wrote this and rewrote it and rewrote it and rewrote it. And I... happy tears as well as sad tears, and just soulful tears as well.
If a book gets us to feel something, then your job is done.
Yeah,
that is fantastic. Mary Lou, any last words before we chat about where people can find you? Is there anything else that you wanted to share about or any of your books or The Last of the Apple Blossom?
I'm just so incredibly grateful to everyone who has been part of this writing journey and all the support that other writers and readers do give to each other and to authors. And to Australian book lovers for everything that you do.
Thank you.
It's so special to have that support, especially in these times. It is so greatly appreciated. And I do feel, because writing it's such a solitary thing most of the time. I am a member of 3 writing groups, but, 2 of them are on Zoom, and I don't get to see my fellow writers as much as I'd like to. But to have that sense of connection through the support of the community and readers and podcasters, it's a very, very special thing. I feel as though that it's a magic carpet that just
I love that.
Supports us and lifts us all.
Thank you. That I'll say thank you on behalf of Darren and I, who put some hours into it to try and recognise what the writers put into their work and, try and share and lift everybody up, because what is it? All boats rise, the water raises all boats. What's that saying?
A rising tide lifts all boats.
That's the one. Yes. So if we can help in any way, then that's a fantastic thing to do.
Well, thank you. It's greatly appreciated.
No worries at all. So, Mary Lou, we can find you on your website?
Yes. So it's Mary Lou Stevens with a PH, .com.au. And on all the socials, Mary Lou Stevens, Mary Lou Writes. Look, I forget all my handles. And I think it's because I just type an author's name I'm interested in and they all pop up.
And they all pop up, don't they? Yes. Yeah.
But it's Mary Lou Writes or Mary Lou Stevens Writes or whatever.
And Twitter, which is where I spotted you, Mary Lou Writer. So there you go. Yeah. As I find the Twitter writing community is just amazing. They are fantastic. A little bit on Instagram, but I'm much more, I was going to say radical. No, I'm much more vocal on Twitter, non-radical.
The writing support, the writing community on Twitter is amazing. Yeah. And that's how I found one of my writers groups. It's actually on Twitter. Good. And we are a great group. Yeah. So I try and block out all the kind of, because Twitter can become a horrible place quite quickly, but that's never the case with writers. Writers are only ever supportive, and especially for a writer like me whose book was released into a lockdown like so many other authors, and we just support each other.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. It's been lovely, lovely chatting with you. Mary Lou Stevens, the author of The Last of the Apple Blossoms, which is a beautiful story, family saga set in the Huon Valley in Tassie. So get and read that, people, because I'm sure that there will be tissues, but there will also be smiles.
Yeah.
Take care, everyone, and bye for now.
Mary Lou Stevens, thank you so much for bringing so much energy to episode number 48 and for having such a wonderful chat with Veronica. It was an absolute pleasure to have you as part of the Australian Book Lovers podcast. And we hope it is not the first and only time you'll be here, hopefully another time. But yeah, what a great chat.
Yes, a really good chat. Covered so much. I love the fact that they wanted to do a comedy TV series for her memoir. That was just a classic. And that's despite sharing her vulnerability, she didn't realise that she was funny or that parts of her life had entertained people. So that was really good. I did like also books as icebergs, thinking about the top 10% is what you see in the book, but writers know about the research and the angst and the months and years of preparation that go into a book. So readers, book lovers, when you are reading that book, just enjoy it and give a little thank you to the author for what in 99% of the cases has been a labour of love.
Well, the same could be said, and I only bring this example up obviously because Mary Lou was in the band, but, you might hear a beautiful song made up of, it might just be 4 simple notes in a melody. But oh my, especially in a band, situation, that may have taken weeks to months, and not to mention the fights over, whether it should do this or do that. So the final product has, like you said, that tip of the iceberg is that beautiful song that you can play over and over again. Beneath it is, who knows, the tales that and the challenges that took place before you could just get that simple little melody together. So the same as a book, yeah.
Yeah.
But yes, with a title like Sex, Drugs and Meditation, how could you not want to do something with it? That just has room for so much. There's definitely a whole scope there. So definitely. But yes, which inspired me a little bit. Well, not the sex, the drugs, and meditation, although all three do inspire me to some degree or another. But our chat earlier before the wonderful interview, but our chat about vulnerability. So that is the subject of my quotes for this week. What about you? What inspired your quotes?
Yeah, it went for the vulnerability and the authenticity. Actually,
stole my idea.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think it was my idea to begin with.
I think it was your idea, 100%.
I've got 2 quotes from Brené Brown. So give us one of your quotes.
Oh, no. I've got a Brené Brown quote as well. I've got
a spare, so let's see what you got.
Well, you start. You do your first Brené Brown,
yep.
and then I'll know if I've been robbed.
Okay, short one.
Okay, definitely not the one I've got.
I think courage is the ability to tell your story.
Yeah.
That's
I love it.
I reckon that works for fiction and non-fiction, whether it's your memoir, whether it's your fantasy, whatever it is, because courage is the ability to tell your story and all that entails. It's thinking of the idea, it's writing it, it's either applying for traditional publishers or publishing yourself, or it's putting it out there and it's marketing and, happy launch day to all of our writers who are putting books out today, this week, this year. So it does take courage, and courage is that being vulnerable. So there you go. I think courage is the ability to tell your story.
Not only that, if you're going to tell your story, you just have to be brutally honest, don't you? You have to be vulnerable and let it all out, because otherwise you're being creative. You're telling a story you'd like it to be. Which is great as well. I mean, obviously creativity, that's all the fun of it. But if you want to just tell your story... And I'm just going to challenge
the brutal honesty. Yeah. I reckon that honesty can be gentle sometimes.
Good point. Yeah, I agree. Yes. I think maybe where that term brutal honesty comes, I guess sometimes
from
the
truth rawness hurts, of being honest. And the fact that it can be
the vulnerability of honesty.
Yeah.
Yes, there we go.
All right, what's your quote?
All right, so my Brené Brown, I'll read mine out.
Okay.
Owning our story can be hard, but not nearly as difficult as spending our lives running from it. Embracing our vulnerabilities is risky, but not nearly as dangerous as giving up on love and belonging and joy, the experiences that make us the most vulnerable. Only when we are brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the infinite power of our light. Yeah. Was that one you had?
No.
Oh,
so I've got 2 different ones. That is a really beautiful quote. Yeah, really nice.
It is a beautiful quote, definitely.
We encourage people to go and read Brené Brown, and she has some fantastic TED Talks as well. That's kind of where she started, because she was originally researching shame, which is fascinating stuff. So, yeah, jump onto TED Talks and listen.
Just give me a call. I've got heaps of shame.
That is a shame. All right, you should definitely read her stuff. My second quote is, well, actually, it's about authenticity. Authenticity is a collection of choices that we have to make every day. It's about the choice to show up and be real, the choice to be honest, the choice to let our true selves be seen.
It is a choice. It's a difficult choice sometimes.
Yeah.
We all wear different hats, so to speak, depending on where we go. It's hard to just be yourself.
Well, yes and no. As I've got older, I've got less tolerant of wearing different faces professionally and personally and, publicly. And really, again, I've been talking about my coaching a bit today, but it's about saying to people that the strengths that you have at home, take those to work. If you're funny at home, take your humour to work. Even if you're in a serious job, you don't have to be somber to be serious, as what's his name? Basil Fawlty said. John Cleese said that, yeah. But I do like that one. So I encourage people to be their selves because it's so much easier. It takes so much stress off if you're not trying to put on a public face. And yes, there is a degree of civility that maybe you wouldn't
I was going to say, do remember to read the room and understand the boundaries.
And read the room is important. But, if you love to talk to people, make sure you talk to people in your job, And I often see people who they need connection, they need to talk to people, they need to do ideas with people, and then they'll choose a job where they're working on their own or they're in a small team. And I think, well, no wonder you're not happy at work because you can't be yourself. So authenticity, that collection of choices that we have to make every day, really important. Show up and be real.
Yeah, touche, yeah.
What's your second one?
My second one is by a lady by the name of Amy Powella, and the quote is, "It's very hard to have ideas. It's very hard to put yourself out there. It's very hard to be vulnerable. But those people who do, that are the dreamers, the thinkers, and the creators. They are the magic people of the world." So I think it's similar to what you've said with your quotes, in the sense of the courage and the that need to be authentic, and by the courage to have ideas too. It's hard to have ideas, and I think I interpret that in this particular context of the quote as it being very hard to have ideas. Just the idea that, no pun intended, the idea that if we have an idea, we may not feel it has any relevance, or we may not have the confidence to let it escape from the brain out into the real world. And like as the next part, it's very hard to put yourself out there. I struggle sometimes. I mean, obviously, I try to be who I am, and that can be good or bad depending on the situation I'm in, because I don't have an off button. Well, I don't have masks too many to put on anymore myself either. So, if I walk into a very clinically precise room, then I may not, I'll be aware of, that I've put myself out there, and I'm a little bit vulnerable because, I just don't. I don't put the mask on that a lot of people feel they have to sometimes. But so that can be good, that can be bad.
It may give the people in the room permission to be more themselves as well.
Yes.
Or to go, look at that guy. He's just being himself. Hey, what the heck?
Let us show him the exit.
You're right. Okay, it can happen.
No, that's all right. That makes it for a fun adventure.
It does.
You get to see the fire escape, you see.
Yes.
No.
Yes. Now, talking about exits, we are nearly at the end of this episode.
We are.
And don't forget that you can find Australian book lovers on the web at australianbooklovers.com. On social media, we're on Twitter at Australian Books. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Australian Book Lovers. So drop in and say hi. All the links to the latest episode are there, as well as on the podcast. We're also on LinkedIn and YouTube for those people who frequent those platforms. And if you love us, leave us some stars. If you want to drop us a line, please do so either on the website or social media.
And
so,
of
Darren,
course, if you have any, I was just going to remind our listeners, if you have any news events or anything in the community you'd like to promote, please do send it in, or even record yourself telling us about it, or even send in an email asking if you can be on the show, and we'll happily do an interview for the news segment. So please, we'd love to help. Our passion is to promote Australian authors. Our passion is to ignite the imagination of Australian book lovers out there. But it's also about celebrating art and the community here, all the beautiful communities we've got across Australia. So if you've got anything you'd like to promote, anything coming up, any events, anything at all, please do write in, let us know. We'll love to put it in our news segment.
Indeed. And
now,
we've got plenty of back episodes to have a listen to in case you need to go for a long walk and listen to us faff on about reading and writing.
And I've done some excellent faffing on this episode. I think I've interrupted you quite a few times. I've gone on extremely long-winded tangents. So to everybody, thank you so much for putting up with me for episode 48. But I before I so rudely again interrupted you, I think you were going to ask me how we're going to do our tagline.
That is exactly what I was going to say. What do we do? Because I do that's a little surprise to me when I finally get the episode is, what has Darren done with the tagline? How has he made us sound fabulous this week or this episode?
Well, while we've been talking, obviously my tangents have been a bit crazy this time, and that may be because on another level I was quietly pondering sex, Sex, Drugs, Meditation being the title, of course, of Mary Louise Stevens' book. But I thought maybe for our tagline, we can be like meditation coaches. So I'll bring in some nice crystal chimes, and what we'll try and do is get our listeners to breathe in, breathe out.
I think you might be taking the mickey.
No, and to remember too.
Because I was going to say, your wife would be cranky with you if you do take the mickey, because she does some beautiful meditations and yoga classes.
That's how I know how it sounds like. That's all right. Thinking. All right.
Yes, because meditation is important, and I do a little every day. So
I do as well, actually. Yeah, so I think it's a fantastic thing to do. So,
otherwise, how do you? The other option would be to do something with apples for Mary Lou's Last of the Apple Blossoms. Tricky.
I have no idea how to sound like an apple. I mean, I could quickly hunt something to bite into and then talk with my mouth full. But
let's go with
after all the frenetic energy that I brought, let's go calm,
steady. Yeah. Take care for now, and remember to breathe. More. Aussie. Pulse.
And exhale. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for episode 48. I really appreciate your patience, because I know you needed it for me for this time. Take care, everybody.
Bye for now.
The alchemist's wife loved watching the sun rise, a fact everyone with whom I spent time in the captain's quarters knew well. They decided the detective and Janus should talk to her, but that didn't stop me and Cole tagging along. She had small wrinkles, conveying kindness rather than worry. As Janus introduced her, she smiled. The stylish deep blue dressing gown, her outfit of choice for early mornings, no hint of age or wear. The sea breeze unable to mess her snow-white hair. Her name was Camilla. She wasn't alone, though. Holding her hand and sharing the view was Molly, the alchemist's mistress. She wore a candy-pink dressing gown that shed fluff all over the deck. You could find her cabin from the trail of bright fuzz. Her damp hair left a wet patch on her shoulders. During this conversation, the sun turned up its slow heat, making her hair dry curly. Now, Janus, why would I kidnap my own husband? I showed her and Molly the ransom note. It does look like your handwriting, Molly said. You've always had those curly tails when you write the letter Q. And look, that tail is bursting with life. She turned to me. I can read handwriting, you know. Write your name and I'll tell you all about yourself. Camilla took the note and studied it closely. Yes, that is a Q I'd be proud to call my own. But, Molly, you have lavish tails on your Qs as well. Molly took the note. I'd also be proud to call that Q my own. I think I picked up the curly Q habit from you. Molly gazed at me. Letters infiltrate us, you know. My life and Camilla's have become so intertwined, our handwriting appears to be the same. She examined the note again. And we're both writing rounded O's. Camilla, yours used to be oval, but now yours are as rounded as mine. This reminds me of the time I solved a case by examining a bowl of alphabet soup. The detective reached for the note, but Molly was unaware of his gesture. The false eyelash sticking to the spoon was a major clue. So, did you write the note? Janus asked Molly. And look at your trademark squiggly S, Molly continued, not answering. That shows you've lived before. She turned to Cole. We've all lived before, you know. I was a fishmonger's wife once. Don't look so shocked. I was very happy once I got used to the smell. Was the sea made of soft chocolate when you were a fishmonger's wife? The detective asked. No, it was an odd period. The sea was water. Didn't you say the sea was made of water when you entered that other dimension, Ferris? Janus jumped out of the detective's bag and landed on deck. We all looked down at him. Yes, I replied. Does this mean Molly used to live in that other dimension? Cole asked. Yes, the detective said enthusiastically. There's not enough evidence to tell, Janus replied. But it matches Ferris's description of the other dimension. Where I come from, ocean is made of water. I couldn't help but sound glum. I think Molly's past life was in my dimension, not the dark one I experienced. How do you know? Camilla asked. Just a feeling. Trust your feelings, Molly said. You're empathic, you know. I can sense it. She gave Camilla a curiously affectionate grin. Ferris is very empathic, like your cousin, Catherine. Yes, Catherine knows everything about us. Camilla slipped a hand under her robe and onto her heart. She's wise beyond her years. Even as a child, she... This conversation isn't getting us anywhere, Cole said. Who wrote this ransom note? It's a long story, Camilla said. Perfect for telling during sunsets, but not the best topic of conversation for watching the sun rise.
Billa Yaradungalang Jirai by Anita Heiss. Love and loss set on the timeless lands of Wiradjuri country and encompassing all the majesty and terror of the Murrumbidgee Billa, the Murrumbidgee River. Billa Yaradungalang Jirai is a beautifully written love story that brings a historical focus to a true event. The river flooding of 1852 in Gundagai sets the scene for Heiss to weave a wonderful tale of Wogadani finding her place in a world of white men and always being drawn back to her own people and country. I loved reading the Wiradjuri words, hearing the stories of connection to land, love and respect for country, and seeing history from Wogadani's view. Elevating, educational and emotion-charged. A great read. A Lifetime of Impossible Days by Tabitha Bird. This is a beautifully crafted and poignant tale of loss, betrayal, healing, and redemption. The job of a good story is to make you feel, and Bird has most certainly done that with her tale of Willow Waters. I love how seamlessly magic slips into the words, so that the focus stays on the three Willas as they discover and rediscover what's important in their life. And it's always lovely to see an Australia that I know on the page, sadly without the magic. This is a fabulous read, and I highly recommend it.
meet again, where magic happens.
Australian Book Lovers acknowledges First Nations peoples and recognises their continuous connection to country, community and to culture. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and honour the sharing of traditional stories passed down through generations. We're committed to a safe and inclusive welcome for authors and readers of all cultures and backgrounds, including people of LGBTQIA+ communities and their families.